Welcome to Have It Out with Galloway. Every single week I'll be here discussing the hottest topics, the biggest world events, but perhaps from a perspective that you will not find easily on the mainstream media. The question this evening is the UK complicit in the Gaza genocide? Well, as the old joke goes, is the Pope a Catholic? Do bears defecate in the woods? The United Kingdom's not just complicit in the current genocide going on in the Gaza Strip, it is complicit in the entire genocidal story of more than 75 years of the calvary of the Palestinian people. I sit in the British Parliament, where in the very chamber I sit in the very room that I'm in every day, the Palestinian disaster, Nakba, catastrophe, was authored, when the Prime Minister of Britain, on behalf of one people, promised to the Zionist Federation, on behalf of a second people, the land that belonged to a third people. None of the three people concerned were, of course, consulted. And after that Balfour Declaration, more than 100 years ago, we began the descent down the bloody staircase which led us to this disaster today. Now, breaking news, the United Nations Security Council has called for a ceasefire for the month of Ramadan. They hope that it will become a lasting ceasefire. But even a lasting ceasefire implies some kind of event at the end which might return the violence, the massacres, the bloodshed, the torture. The truth is, we don't know at the time of recording if Israel will tell the United Nations Security Council to stick their resolution where the sun don't shine. We don't know what the members of the Security Council will do about it were that to be the case. It may be that although he's huffing and puffing, the gangster Netanyahu truly wanted this ceasefire to become into effect. It's possible. We can't trust a word any of these actors say. Neither the actors in Israel and not the actors in the Western world, in the presidencies, in the chancelleries, in the parliaments of the Western world. Is perfectly possible that all of this has been carefully choreographed. We must pray, of course, that there will be a ceasefire, even for a day or a week, of relief from the shot and shell of the Western-backed Israeli occupation force, which has laid waste. Its grim reaper has now taken the lives and the blood of well over 120,000 people who've either been murdered or maimed, mutilated, and wounded. Of course, the United Kingdom is complicit within it. The endless overflights of British aeroplanes, Air Force jets from the bases in Cyprus, the selling of weapons from Britain to Israel, the exchange of intelligence information, where Israel is effectively a sixth eye, the Five Eyes, the white Anglo-Saxon Five Eyes that dominate the intelligence world, has long been shared with Israel. And in this last 170 days and more, when the catastrophe has reached the depths that it has reached, the Five Eyes, the Six Eyes have been operating as one. And what a sight it has been. All this death, all this destruction, almost unbearable, even for those only watching it on our telephones, and certainly unbearable for the victims, the Palestinian victims. You know, it's coming up for Easter in the Western world, in the Eastern Christian world. It's a time when we think about resurrection, will the British government, in some kind of act of epiphany, now mend the great crime that it has committed against the people of Palestine? I'm joined tonight, and in fact every week, with a group of distinguished panelists, as well as an interested live studio audience. Our guest tonight, Low Key, is a rapper, a hip-hop artist, an investigative journalist, and his critically acclaimed music has millions of streams on Spotify, over 25,000 digital downloads, and over 45 million YouTube views. Low Key breaks the ground for independent political music. He's also the host of The Watchdog, a podcast on Mint Press News. Dr. Marwa Osman is a journalist and a presenter. She holds a PhD and 2 masters and is a university lecturer at the Lebanese International University and Maref University. She hosts and produces political shows, as well as being a writer, with her comments being published by a whole variety of outlets. And Fra Hughes is a journalist, author, and human rights activist from the north of Ireland. He has written several books, including An Activist's Tale, My Walk with Palestine, which chronicles his experiences as an international activist and his involvement with the Viva Palestina 5 medical aid convoy. His work focuses on the role of activism in promoting justice and human rights. And a plethora of interested and interesting audience guests joining us from all over the world who will be chipping in throughout the show. But let me turn first, if I may, to my good friend, a sage, a seer, a philosopher king. To say he's a rapper and a hip-hop artist, which he is, and a highly successful one, is not even half the story, as you are about to find out if you haven't seen him before. Low Key, thanks for joining us. I suppose it's the most obvious question in the world. Is the UK complicit in the genocide in Gaza? I know that your answer is the same as mine, yes, but to what extent and in what ways is the UK complicit in the genocide in Gaza?
Well, thank you so much, George, for the very kind introduction. I'm certainly not worthy of the praise that you heaped upon me. But to start with, it's important that people are aware that Britain has a secret military agreement which it signed with Israel in 2020. We do not know the details of that agreement, but it's very likely that it stipulates some level of involvement if either side officially enter hostilities. What we do know is the R1 Shadow spy plane of the Royal Air Force has been flying almost daily over Gaza, and one of the key specialities of that plane is target acquisition. So it would lead you to believe that there has been some involvement on the side of that. We also know that the RAF has sent over 50 military flights to Tel Aviv from the British base in Akrotiri in Cyprus. We also know that around 9 Israeli military jets have landed in this country throughout the bombing of Gaza. We do not know the details of what was on those flights. We know that the US has used the British bases in Cyprus to transport weapons to Israel. We know that Britain, for example, according to Claudia Webb, Member of Parliament, she stated that Britain has granted 26 arms export licenses to Israel during this time. But what we also know is that from the F-35 to the F-16 to the Apache helicopters to even the sniper rifles that Israel uses, they used in 2018 to squash the Great March of Return, where Palestinians were attempting to exercise their right under UN Resolution 194, that even within the sniper rifles, there are components that come from Britain. There are over 100 companies which function in Britain that are involved in the construction of the F-35 fighter jet, which Israel has used to wreak such devastation over Gaza. So really, we are looking at a picture where it's not clear where British intelligence and Israeli intelligence begins and ends on either side. Britain, Israel, and the United States are very much part of a trilateral security arrangement, which sees key functions of the Israelis outsourced to the British, and also vice versa, key functions of the British outsourced to the Israelis. So unfortunately, I would say the answer to your question is definitely.
Just before I go to Aisha on the audience video wall, all of that gives us some leverage then, doesn't it? If Israel refuses to cease fire, we could pull all those plugs.
So omega-6s are worse.
Foreign Secretary, who is David Cameron, is so pro-Israel that he was actually a patron of the JNF, which is the largest settlement building body in Palestine, alongside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli President. And he only resigned from that position once he became Prime Minister. But he has supposedly conditioned the delivery of arms to Israel on the releasing of aid and the allowing of it to enter Gaza. In my personal estimation, I view these as time-buying PR exercises, which the United States and Britain excel at, because in essence, they operate as one hand in the region.
Thanks for that. We'll come back to you. Let's take a view from Aisha, who's in London, on our audience wall. A new innovation. Very glad to see you, Aisha. You're the first person to speak from that wall. What would you like to ask?
Hi, George. I wanted to ask you, what do you make of this UN resolution? If Israel does follow the ceasefire for the rest of Ramadan, what will it do, or what do you think would happen in the West Bank, knowing what happened last time during the ceasefire, where they simply upped their aggression and the murders and the violence in the West Bank?
Well, I mean, one possibility is that Israel refuses to heed the UN Security Council resolution, and the Security Council is then forced to take a decision about what it will do in response to that defiance, or Israel will pretend to be accepting the resolution and, as you put it, merely displace their activity, switch the murder incorporated from Gaza to Jerusalem to the West Bank. And what will the Security Council do then? I think that Biden abstaining on the motion is a significant thing. I don't, on balance, believe Israel wanted him to abstain. I think they wanted him to veto it, but time will tell if it's all some macabre dance of death. But the fact that the resolution passed at all, with Britain voting in favor, it's been abstaining for the last 170 days. The fact that Britain voted for a ceasefire is a tribute to each and every protester, demonstrator, boycotter, letters to the editor, everybody who's ever done anything to stand up against this genocide can take some credit for forcing the British government into the position that it took today. Let me go on to our second guest and introduce her to you, Dr. Marwa Osman, journalist, academic, and activist, presenter on television, and very widely read writer. Dr. Marwa joins us from Lebanon. Dr. Marwa, what's your take on the question we're posing and on the Security Council resolution today?
Thank you for having me on your show, George, and condolences to my brothers and sisters in Palestine for the grave loss of human souls in this past 6 months. And let me start from your last question and then go to your first. The UN resolution, which we watched today, was a bit of something anticipated by many, but a lot suspicious by others as well, like me. I'm very suspicious about how this is going to be implemented in Gaza, whether or not Israel is going to comply with this temporary ceasefire. And I have a lot of questions as to why now, how come the US decided to abstain from the vote, and what is the result going to be mirrored on the ground, whether the Israeli entity will comply or not, whether they will be sending the delegation to Washington or not. A lot of questions, but especially why now? It's a very big question, and whether or not this is just for show, because if you look at the points in that ceasefire, some of them are really very hard to implement if you're going to just talk about Israeli captives and not talk about the Palestinian hostages, more than 8,000 Palestinian hostages in Israeli entity detention centers that this resolution did not even mention. So I have a lot of suspicion concerning this and the application of this so-called ceasefire. Now, going back to your first question, whether or not the UK is complicit, I would have to start by saying that today the Ministry of Health in Gaza issued the latest toll of martyrs and injured, and it says that 32,333 Palestinian civilians were murdered by the Zionist entity, and 74,694 have been injured since October 7, 2023. And despite that, the UK government still refuses to suspend its arms transfer to the Zionist Israeli entity. And despite the fact that it knows that UK licensed equipment are being used, have been used, and will most probably be used to carry out genocide, facilitate serious violations of human rights, of international humanitarian law, including war crimes. And they don't really care, despite the fact that it is now complicit, and that's not me saying, that's a report by the United Nations, the Human Rights Watch. They issued a report saying that the current situation places actually the UK government at risk of failing to prevent the genocide. No, as further than that, it is also being complicit in serious violations of international law, including the violations under Geneva Convention, the Arms Trade Treaty, and domestic laws in the UK itself. And George, for the first time, we have seen UN special rapporteurs saying this, tweeting about this, posting about this, and saying that they have been warning, not from now, since before 2024 entered, that the transfer of the weapons and ammunition that is made by the UK to Zionist Israel is a very heavy violation of international humanitarian law and must stop. And yet the UK government did not stop. Furthermore, it is also complicit in genocide because there are UK citizens, George, who are heavily involved in this act of genocide. Whom can I be referring to? For instance, there's Arye Yitzhak King, who's a British citizen and also the deputy mayor of the occupied Al-Quds, otherwise known as Jerusalem. He's a UK citizen and he's complicit in genocide. You have the very infamous Ilan Levy, who's from North London, who's also a spokesperson for the Israeli entity government, despite the fact that there were some talk in the past week that he was sacked from that job. You have Peter Lerner, who's also originally from Kenton, Northern London, and he became a very prominent figure in the Israeli entity's occupation army as a lieutenant colonel and a spokesperson. And we have Richard Hecht, who's also a Scottish colonel and a voice in the Israeli entity occupation army. And all of these, if they are not putting the UK government in a complicit position, it pushes us to have serious questions regarding the UK's policies regarding its own citizens participating in genocide, and not saying a word about that, despite the fact that they have been arresting and harassing protesters who are just asking and demanding ceasefire. You've also have a lot of complicity when it comes to the UK's role in stopping the fund of the most important UN agency, which is the UNRWA, the UN's relief agency in Gaza. They are complicit in that genocide for pushing, not only stop, but also pushing other states to stop the funding of the UNRWA, despite the fact that there is now starvation, famine in Gaza because of this genocidal war that has been going on since October 7. And added to that, there's a lot of charities working within the UK government's border that have been warning the UK government that they are committing and they are part of facilitating serious violations of humanitarian law, of international humanitarian and humanitarian rights law. They are saying that they are pushing right now for a new wave of activism, asking the public and asking those NGOs who work for aid usually to stop paying taxes for the UK government because it is now complicit in genocide. There's a very important campaign going on in the UK right now called I think it's called No Tax for Genocide campaign. And it's, by the way, it is completely legal. It's UK officials and people who are part of the government who are complicit in genocide, or at least who support Zionist Israel, don't have any way in saying that this is illegal or this should not be happening, or it's a violation of UK domestic law, because there is several legal duties that are included in the 1945 UN Charter and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and also the Terrorism Act of the year 2000 that give a legal foundation for tax resistance against a government like the UK who is completely complicit in genocide in Gaza.
It all sounds very much like complicity to me, Dr. Marwa. Thank you very much indeed for that opening statement. Fra Hughes is a man I've traveled to Gaza with on the Viva Palestina sanctions-busting convoys. He's an author and an activist and a regular broadcaster. He's joining us from Ireland. Fra, it won't come as any surprise to you as an Irishman that the British are being rather powerfully accused of being complicit in genocide. What say you?
Absolutely, I agree 100% with everything that's been said so far. We're witnessing the genocide that's happening on the ground right now in real time, in front of our very eyes through social media. I saw a photograph recently which showed a family in Gaza breaking their fast at iftar with water, lemons, and grass. Now, George, you'll be well aware of the famine we had in 1847 in Ireland, which was a man-made famine, a weapon of war used by the British to subdue the Irish population and also to end the Irish question in British politics for several generations. The people in Ireland died by the side of the road eating grass. So when I saw that picture, I was quite touched. If I could maybe just for 1 second touch on this UN resolution, the draft resolution passed today. Prior to this resolution, the talks taking place in Cairo and different other capitals around the supposed grounds and boundaries for a permanent stroke temporary ceasefire. Hamas was looking for, a minimum of 6 weeks, perhaps going into 6 months, where they would release the Israeli prisoners that they have held under control. What we
I'm
appear
afraid
to have
that
now
video is breaking up now. Not a great video, but a great contribution from Fra Hughes. Let's go back to the video wall and ask Syed Mohsen in London for his point of view.
Well, I listened to the UN output today with a keen ear, and nothing's changed. You've got an inept UN, which is basically controlled by the usual global mafia suspects, and they managed to just about, after 5 months, get essentially 2 weeks of respite for the Palestinians. Now, the reality, I mean, in the short term, I mean, what I wanted to put to you, George, was really to look at what has changed now that we've just seen Israel unveil itself completely. You know, the emperor has no clothes now. There was a time when Zionism was made respectable here, but I think most of the public, even in the West now, understand what's really going on. And there was a time when the two-state solution was the only game in town. And yet it's also being pushed again now by the likes of Biden, etc. They're all still pushing for this two-state solution. But the new reality seems to be that the axis of resistance, of which Hamas and the Islamic Jihad and all the other Palestinian resistance forces are now an integral part, is very much active and alive and has shown itself to be able to resist. How is this going to shape the future of Palestine in terms of what the interests of the Americans are, or the Israelis, who by the way, the current ultra Zionist, ultra nationalist leadership is also not after any kind of two-state solution. I mean, is the two-state solution ever an option, given that these guys are still now pushing it, or is the one-state solution actually now the most likely one to be put forward by military means?
Well, I think that change will come in Palestine in the way that it came in South Africa. Between the hammer of the resistance of the Palestinian people and the anvil of mass international solidarity, boycott, divestment, sanctions, making the ground too hot under the feet of politicians and parties for them to go on with business as usual, supporting Israel to the nth degree. The hammer can be relied upon. The Palestinian people will never surrender. As long as two of them remain alive, there will be a Palestinian resistance and their children after them. The question is, how big and strong can we make the anvil? Those of us not in Palestine, how big and strong can we make the mass movement, which has grown exponentially over the last 6 months, but which was in any case growing and growing? As you know, I was involved in this 50 years ago. And 50 years ago, you could have fitted all of us who support Palestine into one hall with room for some elephants at the back. Now you couldn't fit us into the whole of central London, spilling over the bridge into South London, edging up towards North London. This is a truly mass movement now, but we've got to make it count. Count in elections, count in boycott, divestment, sanctions, demonstrations, and so on. Thanks for that side, Mohsen. Fahima is also in London. Let's hear from her. Fahima, welcome.
Thank you very much. As we know, and it has been said already, that the UK has historically maintained a close relationship with Israel, including diplomatic, economic, and military ties. So to what extent do you think the UK will be held accountable for its support of Israel, especially in your views with the recent developments regarding the efforts to pursue justice through the International Criminal Court? And as we know, how can we maintain that they actually will be accountable? Because as of recently, my last update researching, knowing that the ICC has not even issued any formal condemnation specifically related to the Iraq war perpetrators.
Well, let's throw to the oracle, a man who knows both the Iraqi and the Palestinian cases so well. Low-key, will Britain ever be held to account for what it's done? And if so, how? How could that happen?
Well, in the case of the International Criminal Court, the lawyer who was just appointed to head the investigation into Palestine and the crimes committed there is in fact a donor to the Conservative Party. And he's somebody that when put in the position to make the decision, made sure that no British soldiers were prosecuted for war crimes in the Iraqi context. Of course, the question points clearly to a kind of infallibility of these particular global powers during this section of human history. But the pendulum is moving in a different direction, and the global economy is returning to a more natural equilibrium, which I think along with it will render these types of exertions of force. You know, what you're talking about in Gaza is the power, to some extent, of the global north being visited upon the heads and the shoulders of what is deemed to be the most vulnerable part of the global south. Gaza is separated by land from its allies in the rest of the resistance axis. And you have really in the region, on one side, the resistance axis, but then on the other side, the assistance axis. So the axis of assistance, which comprises of the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Egypt, and others in the region, have worked to circumvent some of the greatest achievements of the axis of resistance over the last period. For example, when the Yemeni armed forces attempted to implement merely a form of international law, when they said, if Israel will be pursuing genocide in Gaza, we will take it into our own hands to block these ships. And it has to be remembered that many of the ships, and especially the initial ships, were vessels owned by companies directly linked to Israeli intelligence. For example, Zodiac Maritime, owned by the Offer family. This is a shipping company which has a history of ferrying Israeli agents across the region to carry out assassinations. And so what happened was the Yemeni armed forces blockaded the Red Sea and have now extended that blockade to the Indian Ocean. But what did the axis of assistance do? It found a way to, rather than relying on the port of Eilat, which had it dropped in the imports that were coming in by over 80%. It brought it to a standstill almost. And you have to remember that the economic ramifications for the Zionist entity of this entire period of time have been massive. It's never been hit as hard as it has been economically during this period. But anyway, the axis of assistance saw to it to create a land bridge which went from the UAE to Saudi Arabia to Jordan and then into the Zionist entity. And so what we're looking at is those in the region and those internationally that have a fear of this justice, divine justice, which is fully deserved by the Palestinians and others in the region, doing everything they can to block it. So personally, I do not hold great hope in specifically the International Criminal Court. The International Court of Justice could be a slightly different story, but I think the extent to which any decisions made there can have an impact on the material reality is yet to be seen. And I much agree with you that it's the balance of the international pressure, the inability to withstand some of the domestic pressure that comes upon some of the global powers, but most importantly, the mechanisms of resistance within the region who are working day and night without sleep to try and force a different equation in Gaza.
Thank you. Dr. Marwa, where do you stand on that? Do you think, as I do, that there will be no justice forthcoming in the so-called international legal system, that being more or less lipstick on the pig of injustice that the world order has been, but that there may be accountability and a holding to account in political change in Western countries? Where do you stand?
Well, I'll tell you, George, from experience that how Lebanon dealt with the non-existent international community and the ineffective UNSC resolutions is that we took our land back, we kicked the Zionists out by our own heroes, by the people who are native to the land, aka the resistance. So we really, as natives of West Asia, as natives of the Levant in specific, that region, me coming from a region that is on the border with both occupied Palestine and the Golan Heights. I remember on October 7th, actually, I was with you on one of your shows and we spoke about what the prospects were. And I was there. I was in my house on the border between occupied Palestine and the Golan Heights. And I told you that we support the resistance. We believe in the resistance. And I still say that. Why do I say that? Because despite the fact that it's been 6 months that I've been displaced from my house, right there where I was with you 6 months ago, because of Zionist Israel, not because they wanted to wage a war, but because our people, my resistance in Lebanon, stood steadfast and said, we will not let go of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We will not leave them be alone. We will engage. And we in Lebanon attacked military posts for the Zionist entity in support of Palestine. So hence why we didn't even wait. It started on October 8th at 6:45 a.m. I was there. I watched it firsthand. I started reporting from there. This is great example, George, of how we operate here. We don't wait for justice that is going to come from the international community or from the UNSC or from the global powers, because we know that it does not exist. We know that they operate in a way that only garners interests for their own colonial power, for their own imperial power, for their own entities, the likes of the cancerous Zionist entity in our region. And if you look at the UNSC draft resolution that was passed today, you could clearly see that it is in the favor of Zionist Israel, by the way. Yes, we want Gaza to breathe. We need some sort of a ceasefire for the people to breathe, especially in Ramadan. But on the same page, you could see that it is actually in the interest of the Zionist entity, which has been losing a very strategic loss in history that they have not been lived before. They have never experienced before this kind of level of
well, they're beginning to
defeat.
lose friends also, Dr. Marwa, and as we go to air, one of those might be the Prime Minister of Canada, one of the Zionist state's most powerful friends. Let's go to one of my most powerful friends, one of my oldest friends, Dr. Mala, who joins us from Canada in Ontario. Doctor, wonderful to see you again. Any update you can give us? The air is full of rumors that Israel's friend Justin Trudeau might be in his last days.
Yes, Habibi George, I'm talking of oldest friend, just talk of yourself. It's the spirit by, youthful spirit, whether for you or for many others. Okay. And let me take the opportunity to say salam and greeting to dear sister, Dr. Marwa and Sakina and dear friend and comrade, Fra. In this segment so far, there are so many themes could be discussed at length and which we haven't come across and discussed yet. But let me start from Canada. As you know, Canada might be out, but the question who will be in is more important, because if it is the Conservative, then you'll be talking about a Zionist government in Canada. And that, takes me to the point, George. Can you tell me where on this globe the UK was not and has not been complicit? Can we name any continent where the UK or the Great Britain has not been complicit in genocide and crimes? If there is a justice on this world, so most leaders throughout the centuries of the UK and Western entities should be rotten in jail. You worked very hard against the genocide of Iraqi people, and you were accused. And what this led to, the lies of Tony Blair and George Bush, led to more than 1 million Iraqi dead. You want to take any other part of the world and you will see literally the rulers of the bridge, throughout many centuries, their hands is soaking with the blood of people from all over. from the Philippines to Australia to Canada. Look at the map, Australia and Canada, they are at the total different ends of the world. And what the UK did with, the First Nation and Aboriginal people, they committed massacres against them, George, and you know it, and you talk about it. So the question is, what can we, you and me and all of us, do to attempt to bring some justice to the victims of the UK and Western imperialism and colonialism and the crimes? Maybe by election, somebody
the reason the sun never set on the British Empire is because God would never trust us in the dark, as you well know. But in Ireland, of course, for 800 years before we started occupying other people, we occupied Ireland and held it as a colony and visited famine upon it. Ireland didn't starve. Ireland was starved, just like Gaza was starved, is being starved. Let's go back to Fra Hughes in Ireland for a perspective on that. Fra, welcome.
Thanks, George. As I said earlier on, just about what happened with the famine, that's why the Irish people have such an affinity and such empathy for what's happening in Palestine. We suffered from military occupation, we suffered from massacres, we suffered from ethnic cleansing and partial colonization of the north of Ireland in the 17th century. So I only see the difference between what's happening in Palestine and Gaza today, which is on such an inhuman, monstrous scale. It's just a time scale. What happened in Ireland in the 19th century with the famine is exactly being replicated today in Gaza. Starvation being used as a weapon of war, starvation being used as a form of subjugation. And it appears that starvation is being used as part of the Zionist regime's negotiations behind the scenes with Hamas. I just touched earlier briefly that Hamas was trying to get an extended ceasefire in these talks that were being held in Cairo and Paris and other capital cities. And what they wanted to do was release the prisoners that they hold in small tranches, kind of adherent to the good faith of the Israelis on the ground. But it appears with this UN resolution today that a rabbit has been pulled out of the hat and the carpet has been pulled from under Hamas. It's just my personal opinion, but we have gone from what seemed to be a hope for a ceasefire between 6 weeks and 6 months, which could then possibly be extended because once the guns go silent, it's harder to turn them back on again. And what we're looking at is possibly a 2-week ceasefire. We're looking at food for hostages, which has been the stated goal of the Zionist regime and the Americans right up until the UN vote that was vetoed 3 days ago. I think Israel can say what it wants in the public domain. I think they are delighted that this draft resolution has been passed. They will have all their hostages potentially released in one go. And I believe once that happens, Netanyahu had two stated aims. One, to free the hostages, as he calls them, and the second, to destroy Hamas. What, in effect, he might have is a release of the hostages, which kind of negates the pressure and leverage that he's under from his own constituents in Israel, who aren't cared about the deaths and the massacres and the rapes in Gaza, but are only concerned about the 150 plus prisoners.
Well, everything will be determined by the definition of the word hostages. If I were negotiating it, I would be treating the Palestinian prisoners, 7,800 of them, I'd be treating them as hostages. And when the resolution says the release of all hostages, I'd be saying that's all the Israeli captives and all the Palestinian captives. We'll see how that works out in coming days. Thanks for that, Fra. Let's go back to the wall. Nargis is in London. she has a question. Splendid hat, Nargis. You need to wear a hat to come on this show.
First of all, George, congratulations.
Thank you.
You won. You're a fighter for truth.
Thank you.
And secondly, I wanted to salute and give a great salute of honor to Gaza and to Palestine and to all the forces of good who are now fighting and facing the forces of evil. We should correct now. The masks are have all fallen, and we should correct Bush Jr. when he said that he was going against the axis of evil, but he was leading the axis of evil actually, and we should also tell him that it's not God who spoke to him at the time; it was Satan.
Indeed.
And unfortunately for the Israelis now, there's how I see it is the end. Pack and go. It's now time to give what belongs to the Palestinians back, their land, their identity, their history, their roots. They will never go anywhere. All the maths say that with the axis of resistance that I salute to, from Yemen to Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Iran to the silent ones, because we don't know who are the silent ones also here. And Israel is becoming a liability. Israel was one of the largest and most powerful tentacles of the Zionist octopus. I always like to remind you about the Zionist octopus. And this tentacle is becoming a liability now. And thanks to South Africa, I applaud them so much, because it's thanks to them this time, you know. The scandal went so wide all over the world that now not everyone wants to be found in, I don't know, a Nuremberg-style tribunal or court that will happen soon. And you have politicians starting to pull their pins from the game one by one.
Well,
I don't know.
the Nuremberg would have to sit in permanent session. Nargis, thanks for that. Loki, where do you stand on this recent Security Council resolution? Does it provide, in your view, any basis for at least a lengthy cessation of the genocide?
So my understanding of it at this stage is that it only would provide for the next 2 to 3 weeks. What I also understand is the US ambassador to the United Nations tried to immediately say it was a non-binding ceasefire because it wasn't covered by Chapter 7 in the United Nations protocols. That then was challenged by experts on the issue and said it was binding. I do also agree that it stipulates the release of the Israeli captives who are in Gaza, who it has to be noted that these captives have been being killed by the Israeli military in its raids on Gaza. In addition to that, I think it's also worth pointing out that the Russian representative to the United Nations attempted to insert the word permanent into the motion and was not able to do that. And that is obviously a cause for concern.
It's definitely not a good sign. Days to come will tell us how bad a sign it is, I'm sure. Dr. Frank Galloway, another old friend of mine, one of life's miracles, an Italian Protestant. Go ahead, Dr. Frank.
Well, George, it seems to me that we have a lesson to learn. And the lesson is that at the end of the day, Israel listens only to force, only force. Declarations, resolutions, statements, moral assertions cut no ice with the rulers of state of Israel. Netanyahu doesn't give a damn. So we have to find ways in which can bring force to bear upon the perpetrators of the Gaza genocide. Certainly disinvestment, BDS, the campaign of disinvestment is a strong, powerful tool, but it really hurts. It really hurts the state of Israel and its supporters. And I belong to a group, the Lambeth Witness Group, and we are actually agitating in that way. But I want to be bold enough to say that it would be good if there was an international body like there was, let's say, in Spain during the Civil War, or indeed when Cuba sent fighters to South Africa, to Angola, to fight with South Africans, a body of volunteers who would volunteer to, in some ways, to fight the Israeli butcher of children, the children killers in Gaza, and also eventually, possibly, even states like Brazil under Lula, even possibly South Africa, and maybe, inshallah, some Arab state would actually take the initiative and do something forceful about this monstrous aggression, which has completely disgusted every decent person in the world, and which we must not let go unpunished. When punishment belongs to ethics. Perpetrators of crimes should be punished. And we can begin to do that by disinvestment, by BDS, but there are other ways. I support the idea of a body of volunteers who would actually go and fight this oppression in Palestine.
I'm not sure how that could happen. The states through which it would be necessary for volunteers to pass are members of what Low-Key memorably called the axis of assistance. So the boundaries of the dichotomy between the axis of resistance and the axis of assistance would have to alter for that to happen. Tariq Othman is a Palestinian in Luton, in the south of England. Tariq, welcome. What's your take on these things?
George, yeah, I mean the take is self-explanatory, as everyone has been explaining so far. What we are seeing is, of course, important, and I do think represents a sort of fork in the road for Israel. The discussion it has now, the choice it has now, is to continue isolating itself, to force it into a position where it no longer has any friends, as it now is becoming orphaned by its usual Western parents, or it can decide to move towards a more reconciliatory path and become more peaceful and fundamentally change its Zionist core. But I think related to what many others have been talking about and what you have just mentioned, what is it that we can do? You know, maybe we aren't able to go into and fight with the axis of resistance, as you mentioned, but what is it we can do here in Luton, in London, in the UK, to replicate some of your successes that you've had in Rochdale, for example, and turn them into more powerful and effective successes that can do more of what we've seen in the United Nations today?
Well, I'll be speaking in Luton soon. I hope you come along to the meeting. I have some ideas in that regard. It's not realistic for people in Western countries to travel to Gaza. In any case, Frankly, there are enough fighters in Gaza. The resistance is not defeated. What is necessary is to change the balance of power in the region and the balance of power in the world, in the Western world. The old world is dying, that much is obvious, but the new world really is struggling to be born. That's why we are in this extended period of under the rule of monsters. The power, growing power, no doubt, of countries like Russia, China, Iran, South Africa, Brazil, is not yet powerful enough to say halt, no more, no further. We will not accept any more of this. And if you don't stop it, we'll be landing our own ships on your beach that you hope to turn into beachfront properties. We're not yet at that stage, that much is clear. But the axis of resistance in the region is growing more powerful. I suppose the question, I'm going to ask Dr. Marwa this, the question is, how secure are those on the thrones of the axis of assistance? Can we look for any change in their behavior or any change in them being replaced by someone else? Dr. Marwa.
Well, change in their behavior, that's a big no-no because they are part of the colonial system that was installed in the region. They are an extension to the regimes found in the West. Now, them be ousted, that has to do with how powerful their like the natives of those countries are against those regimes, and it's a big debate that could take a lot of time to research and talk about the minorities that are being oppressed and how can they stand in the face of these regimes. But I have a suggestion concerning what your lovely priest was suggesting, and you said it's not applicable because you have access of assistance countries, but I don't want you to forget that there's Lebanon and there's the Muqawama in Lebanon and there's the Saraya Muqawama in Lebanon, which actually accepts anyone who would like to come and take part in the fight against Zionist Israel, because we have 120 kilometers between us, give or take 100 plus or minus 120 kilometers between Lebanon and occupied Palestine. And just as Zionist Israel brought about from all over the world mercenaries to help out in this genocide against our people in Palestine from all over the world, despite the fact that they say they are natives to Palestine, which they are not, we can also do that. How? Well, you have to go to the people who are capable of doing that, but Lebanon always welcomes whoever wants to fight against Zionist Israel and to fight.
Lebanon will always be there. I entered this Arab world through the portals of Lebanon in 1977. I've never been able to escape, Dr. Marwa. Thank you to you, to Fra Hughes, to Loki, our panelists, to all of the studio audience, and my apologies for those of you who didn't get in. Well, this has been the first, but God willing, not the last, Have It Out with Galloway. If you want to join our studio audience, be up there asking questions from that video wall, then go to our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you, and if it was, come back, same time, same place, next week for Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.